Morning, Corla. Every time I stand up in this house to talk about mother and baby homes, I feel the weight of it. It's always hard to know where to begin when talking about something that has caused generations of trauma for so many people. It's difficult to convey the hurt, the bewilderment, and the sheer rage that no one is actually being held accountable for these crimes, and it doesn't look like anyone ever will be. The scale of what went on in these institutions is staggering, horrifying. Forced adoptions, falsified records, vaccine trials, medical experiments, missing children, mass graves, the forced separation of families, the casual obliteration of histories. Survivors deserve justice, the public are behind them, and the government still isn't listening. Despite what the Minister claims, this clearly is not a survivor-centred scheme, nor is it based on transitional justice. The headline-grabbing figures, I think, might have looked impressive at first glance, but the real story lies in the details. Time limits, signing away of litigation rights, and disregarding very many survivors' trauma. Regrettably, none of this is inspiring or surprising. After all, this government resisted attempts to give survivors access to their personal records, continues to deny GDPR and refuse to extend the Commission of Investigation to allow for greater accountability. All of this compounds the abuse suffered by thousands of individuals and their families from the state-administered and church-run system that incarcerated single and unmarried mothers, victims of rape and children. The redress scheme needs considerable reform. If the Minister is sincere about his intention to listen to survivors, then he needs to start acting like it. I'm going to use my time to highlight some of the deficiencies of the scheme, but there are many others that I won't have time to address. The government needs to listen to the survivor groups, not to a deeply inadequate Commission's report, and not to attempts by the department to limit the rights of survivors. The main defect is the highly insulting requirement for individuals to have spent 6 months as a child in a mother and baby institution. Forced family separation is one of the worst human rights violations. The state and religious orders intentionally separated mothers and babies, stigmatised them, and denied them means to find each other. This is a lived and very real trauma which is obviously not bound by a minimum time in an institution. Someone born in a mother and baby home could have spent a week in there, but a lifetime searching for their family. Under this scheme, they are not entitled to redress. Survivors have expressed their devastation at the cruel stipulation. Clinicians and medics have shown that the 6-month requisite has no basis in evidence and shows no understanding of trauma. The letter to the Minister from over 30 experts states that childhood trauma has the greatest impact early in childhood. They point out there is no threshold of time linked to this, and as a result, I'm quoting this directly, having an arbitrary period of 6 months exposure is simply that, arbitrary. This arbitrary time restriction needs to go, Minister. Any and all children who are subjected to this cruel system deserve acknowledgement and redress. That is the absolute bare minimum. The second issue relates to the provision that those who received redress in respective time in mother and baby homes under the Residential Institutions Redress Scheme cannot access this scheme. This limitation is symptomatic of no understanding of trauma and a pervasive civil servant mindset that is more concerned with balance sheets than justice. I'm going to quote directly from the government's proposal to give you a sense of the cold, unsympathetic language used. The intention is to prevent double counting by making a second payment in respect of the same institutional experience. In other words, how dare you seek more redress? Why can't you be happy with the little you were given? This language is condescending and paternalistic, and it makes another appearance in the third matter I want to raise, which is the legal waiver. If you're a survivor of a mother and baby home and you want to avail of this scheme, you must sign away your rights to take this matter to court. In essence, the government is proposing a legal gagging order on survivors. In other words, take the official apology and as little as €5,000 and sign away your right to any legal recourse. Not only is this deeply troubling in principle, the proposed scheme's language reveals the patronising attitude of the government. They acknowledge that applicants, and I quote again, may be disappointed at the inclusion of a waiver in the scheme, and some may interpret it as representing a failure to take responsibility or be truly accountable, but this is not the case. Why? Because the Taoiseach apologised. In other words, sign away your rights and be happy with an inadequate apology. The government goes on to explain how survivors should accept redress, as it will spare them burdensome court procedures and the risk of incurring high legal fees. It doesn't take a legal expert to read between the lines here. If you do not sign the waiver, your other option will be an adversarial court case because the state will oppose you. The government seems to have no appreciation for the anger among survivors and the general public. People are simply not going to stand for this redress scheme. Not only is there a complete lack of understanding and empathy for survivors, but no lessons have been learned, for example, from the ongoing mass rejection of the cervical check scheme. The same will happen with this redress unless major deficiencies are rectified. Survivors will rightly reject it, and they will be supported by society. Limitations, caveats, waivers were found in previous redress schemes for survivors of institutional and clerical abuse, for the survivors of Magdalene laundries. The difference now is that we will not stand for it. In the past week, we've gotten a sense of the anger and the frustration at this scheme. The opposition to the flawed elements will only increase when it comes to the legislation. If the Minister is not going to make the necessary changes because it's the right thing to do, perhaps he will do in response to the waves of public pressure that are on the way. We saw it last year with the public outcry concerning the archive of the Mother and Baby Homes Commission. Society has changed. People are incredibly angry at the abuses perpetuated by this state and religious organisations. Furthermore, they are shocked at the treatment of survivors, and this anger will not abate. The next issue is the Minister's reference to the Birth Information and Tracing Bill as part of the government's response. During the pre-legislative scrutiny of the bill, we have heard from survivor groups, human rights advocates and experts, and data rights experts who have pointed out the multiple issues with the legislation. It places barriers to access birth records, it limits early life and care information, and it denies siblings and other relatives access. The legislation needs significant changes if it is to come anywhere near what the Minister is claiming it does. Finally, where is the accountability? Ultimately, nobody is being held to account for the worst abuses perpetuated by this state against its citizens, against vulnerable young women, people with special needs, victims of rape and incest, members of ethnic minorities. Why are existing laws against incarceration, forced labour or human trafficking not being applied? Why is there one rule for church and state and one rule for everybody else? Why hasn't the coroner investigated the unnatural deaths that occurred in these institutions? We know there are mass graves. We know there was crimes that occurred. And instead of responding, seeking justice and accountability, the government's burials bill is actually limiting the powers of the coroner to investigate. You couldn't make it up. Disgracefully, the outline of the scheme informs us that the Minister has written to the religious congregations seeking to, and I quote, meet with them in order to discuss how they might contribute to the scheme. To discuss how they might contribute. This is cap in hand stuff. It's 2021, not 1950. Where are the demands for justice? Where are the attempts to seize the proceeds of illegalities? These orders profited from these systems. Not only did they receive state payments, they participated in forced labour, human trafficking, and the sale of babies for money. Many of the people who committed these heinous crimes are now deceased, but not all of them, and the orders still have assets from the money made off the backs of young mothers, children, and babies. Where is the scheme to seize them for survivors? I don't have the time to raise the other deficiencies, such as the overall inadequacies of the financial amounts and the limiting of the scheme to only certain institutions, but these will also need to be addressed. While the scheme in its current form has many insulting and callous flaws, it is not a done deal. The government still has time to do the right thing and put in place a scheme that is actually survivor-centred and based on transitional justice. There is still time to do the right thing by survivors.
Thank you, Deputy.
But know that if you do not, survivors will not stand for it, and neither will any of us.
Thank you, Deputy. I'll turn next